if you forget about gold for just 1 minute, there is some very interesting things, historically speaking, that are happening right now to silver. There are things nobody knows about, the media isn't talking about, and quite frankly, most investors don't even know what's going on. And to discuss what is happening, we have none other than the silver chartist, my good friend Steve Penny. He is the creator of the Silver Chartist newsletter. It's an amazing free newsletter, breaks down the top mining stocks in the silver space and everything you need to know as an investor to make as much money as possible in this era of currency devaluation. The link to the free newsletter is in the description right there down below, and it is pinned to the comments right there down below. So you can go ahead and sign up to that for free. Make sure you hit the like button on this video right over there or there to send this out into the YouTube universe way, way, way out to more people. And last but not least, let's give a shout out. Channel sponsor, Vizsla Silver. Vizsla, thank you for being our mining stock sponsor on our channel. And Steve, how we doing?
Good, brother. How are you?
Good. So, all right. If you forget about gold, right? Because that's the thing, most people, oftentimes even silver is categorized as gold. So someone won't even say gold and silver, they'll just say gold. But there's a lot of very interesting historical things happening right now in silver that make it a very attractive investment opportunity. So why don't you break down some of these historic things for us?
Yeah, it's such a good point. A lot of people say gold when they mean gold and silver. Little pet peeve of mine, but I view them actually as two kind of very different things. I look to gold as like capital preservation. If I just want to preserve my purchasing power, that's my mindset in gold. Where with silver, I think there's plenty of opportunity for capital appreciation. And a lot of people also conflate volatility with risk. From a historical perspective, I actually see silver as a lower risk play on, that the price is going to go up than I do gold. I mean, it'll be a much more volatile ride, but I think silver has a much more compelling risk reward setup, especially right here, right now.
The volatility is an interesting one too, because you see how little volatility there is in gold. I was thinking about this the other day, especially watching Bitcoin, because you see the example of the volatility, and if you're not used to it, it's terrible on the downside. Same with silver. But when you're used to it, it's amazing on the upside, because you get these times where in 12 days, you get an entire move of a year, right? And that kind of happened to silver in 2020. So talk to me a little bit more about this volatility in silver and why you love it.
Yeah, I love out of favor assets and I like volatile assets. That's not for everyone. It's a certain kind of person has to be drawn to these. You say gold isn't volatile. Most mainstream investors would say gold is really volatile. But, we're in junior silver and uranium mining stocks. So we're like gold, that's boring for people like us. But, just from a potential upside perspective, I look to uranium sector and the silver mining sector as really having the most upside potential of any sectors right now across the whole spectrum. And, silver is about the only commodity on the planet trading below its 1980 high. I mean, it's like half of where it was in 1980. So the upside here is really, really quite compelling.
It is trading below the 1980 high. Is that what you said?
Yeah. In 1980, silver peaked at like $49. And here we are at 28 and change. So that's almost half of where it was.
Is there any other commodities or assets that are trading half of their high from 1980? I was looking at a chart recently. Lumber's up 300% in a year, and all these things are up significantly in 1 year. Is there any other?
If there is, I have not seen one. There might be some kind of off the radar weird commodity, but as far as I know, silver is the only one that's trading where it was below where it was 40 years ago. And we're not talking just like a little bit below. I mean, it's almost half of where it was 40 years ago. So that alone is pretty compelling. And you think about all the currency units that have been created over this past 40 years and pair that with this tiny little market. It just takes a little shift in global investor psychology to say, hey, you know what? I want a little bit of exposure to silver. And, the upside is really quite astonishing.
Currency units is a funny word. I've come to really like it, but I've never heard the word before I started interviewing people, and I've noticed some other people refer to it as currency units. Tell me why you use that word.
Yeah, last time we did a video, we mentioned Mike Maloney. So I've read all his books multiple times, and he's one I look up to, consider him a mentor. And he's got me trained to call fiat paper currency or digital currency currency, where money is silver and gold. So I've been trained by him well.
What does it mean? What is a currency unit? Why do you say, for someone that says, why are you calling it that and not money? Or what's a currency unit? How does it differentiate from money or
Well,
whatnot?
yeah, currency there's a difference between currency and money, and that's the distinction Mike Maloney makes. Money is gold and silver. There's a handful of characteristics that money have to have, and silver and gold are really the only two elements on the planet that have all of those characteristics. It has to be fungible. It has to be, uniform. Like an ounce of silver is an ounce of silver. It's not different. Like diamonds, there's different grades and all this. Where currency is created by governments. It's we use it for transacting, but it doesn't hold it. It's not a store of value right there. That's another characteristic of money. So silver and gold are the only two metals that have that.
So we're in this weird time where there is a lot more currency units being created right now. And one of the things that I have found interesting is it seems like more people are recognizing that things are getting more expensive. Um, Everyone notices how much more expensive gas is getting. People seem to notice that their grocery bills are getting more expensive. People seem to notice that houses are getting more expensive, apartments are getting more expensive, rentals are getting more expensive. I read a stat recently that rentals were on some type of mathematical ratio, the highest that they'd ever been. And I kind of think that's interesting because you said earlier there only needs to be a small shift in investor psyche to flood into real assets, whatever they are. There's only a couple of them. And that how the effect that could have on silver. Do you find that right now that this shift is happening in consciousness where maybe people are starting to recognize, even if they don't know how to define it, they're starting to see things are more expensive?
I do. Yeah. I mean, just subjective anecdotal evidence, just speaking with everyday people are talking about inflation. I was just, I got my dirt bike fixed the other day, and, the guy getting it, did the work on it, was talking about the parts. This part used to be $40 a couple months ago. Now it's $80 and it's on backlog. It took like 6 weeks to get it. This is just, he doesn't strike me as someone who studies the financial system and all this, but he's noticing, hey, the price of this thing just doubled and I have to wait for it. So, investors are waking up, and I think some of that money is coming into the silver market. It's just, there's a distinction between the paper price and the physical price. So if you just pull up your favorite internet site and look at the price of silver, it's going to tell you the paper price, supply and demand of paper contracts that are set on the COMEX. But if you want that physical silver, we're seeing it there because premiums are exploding. So if you want to get your hands on physical, you're probably going to pay at least $35, $36, if not more.
That's very interesting. That was what he said to you about the parts, about the price increase, and the supply chain disruption of it.
Mm-hmm. And you and I have talked in the past about monetary velocity. I know you've had Jim Rickards on several times, and he talks about the declining monetary velocity. Well, there are some signs that monetary velocity is starting to pick up. And I define inflation as an increase in the currency supply. That's inflation. Rising prices are a symptom of that inflation. And we're starting to see the symptoms right now. And that's translating over into investor psychology. And, I think that's beneficial towards commodities and especially silver.
So we're going to take a 15-second break to let everyone know about Silver Chartist, which is a free newsletter. It's right there down below. So we're going to give a special commercial shout out to Silver Chartist. So the link is in the description and pinned to the comments right there down below. If you want to sign up to that, it's free. And it's an amazing newsletter, and I always get awesome comments of people stoked after they signed up. It's free. So go ahead and do that. Now, Steve, how about the supply chain disruptions, the increase in price, the Fed saying it's transitory? What is your opinion on all of this happening?
I don't rule out. So I had this conversation with someone earlier, the inflation versus deflation debate. And what I found just over the last 15 years of studying these markets is that often very smart people with well-reasoned opinions and conclusions, they're both right, but in different timeframes. So I think ultimately, almost all of us would agree we're going to see very big inflation coming. The question is, do we see a deflationary bust first? I'm in the camp that I don't think we're going to see that. I think we saw that last March. I think that was the deflation. I think we're on. I don't think this is transitory. And with the Fed and other central banks around the world pumping in so much liquidity, that's inflationary. But you couple that also with governments around the world paying people to not work. So that decreases the productive output of all these economies. So there's less goods, less services available, and you've got more currency units chasing a smaller quantity of goods and services. So right there, that leads to higher prices.
They blame the supply disruption on COVID,
Yeah.
but if you look at history of all of these places that have had these currency issues and these, out of control governments, they all have supply chain problems.
Mhm.
And so I find it interesting because you can't go back in history and find any examples of places that have moved towards these types of incredible devaluation in currencies, incredible inflation, or currency crisis, or socialist regimes. They all have this problem. And I do find that they blame it on, the,
COVID.
as George Gammon calls it, the cerveza sickness.
Yeah.
But do you find that interesting? Do you find that as an interesting sign that we're starting to see the supply chain disruption? And I don't know, how do you even get that to stop at this point?
Yeah, I think it's a cycle, a spiral that's going to feed on itself. Um, when you're paying people to not work, it's hard to take those benefits away. Whenever the government gives you something, which, by the way, the governments have nothing to give you, they can only take from one person and give to another. They're not giving anyone anything. But that aside, when they create incentives to not work, it's hard to take that away. So we're seeing, labor shortages all around to create products and services. So I think this is a trend that's only going to accelerate. And, maybe shifting a little bit, I think now's the time to maybe consider stocking up on some things from a preparedness perspective. Practical preparedness is what I like to call it. So, there's more than just silver and gold.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Sure.
Why practical preparedness, and what does it consist of?
Yeah, so we're seeing supply chain disruptions now, but it's not in a way that it doesn't really affect our everyday lives for most people. I mean, there's some minor inconveniences, but if this is something that continues, we could see shortages. We saw it in the beginning of the cerveza sickness where you couldn't get toilet paper. I think that was just one early sign of things that we're likely to see in the years ahead. So, now's the time to have some things that you use anyway that are non-perishable. And by the way, they're only going to get more expensive. So you can almost look at it as almost like an investment, because you're probably buying it cheaper now than you'll need down the road.
Yeah, I have 17,000 cans of tuna, actually. I'm just joking. But so then my next question is, what happens as this continues? Because this is kind of the $1 million question, right? And the reason I say that is because I ask everybody this, like, what happens next, right? And for the most part, I feel, just my opinion, that when I ask people this, they want to be optimistic, but in my opinion, it comes off as delusional. They say something like this: this is America, and we'll get through it. We always get through it. We always find a way to get through it. And I'm like, yeah, but like, do you want me to break this down for you a little bit more? Because it seems like a deflection answer. I don't know how you put the cat how do you put the cat in the bag when tens of millions of people are so used to an unemployment check? How are you going to put the cat back in the bag? I mean, there's a percentage of people that need it, right? But there's a huge percentage of there are help wanted signs everywhere in America. My favorite restaurant can't get a dishwasher still because why would they go work the dishwasher job? How do you put the cat back in the bag? How do you stop inflation if the consequences of it are, if you significantly rise rates, you can crash everything? How do you put the cat in the bag on massive supply chain disruptions and houses going up to the moon? Like, I don't know how you stop it. And I feel some people would call me negative in respect to that. I just feel like I'm being rational. How is it going to stop? And I wonder what that looks like to you in your opinion.
Yeah, that's literally like the $1 million question is how does this all resolve itself? And someone I respect, I think it's Chris Martinson, said problems have solutions, but predicaments have managed outcomes. There are no solutions. What we face here from an economic perspective is a predicament. There's no solution. There's no cure-all for this. Um, you know, there's going to have to be some short-term pain at some point. And the crux of the matter is that the further you kick the can down the road, you make that day of reckoning, that eventual day of reckoning, even more painful. So, the right thing to do would be to burst this bubble now, raise rates, and get back to a real economy sooner. But that would be incredibly painful. That would involve politicians telling people, "Hey, we promised too much. There's not enough currency units available to make good on all these promises. The money doesn't exist." They're not going to do that. There's no way they're going to do that. So instead, they're going to try and inflate away the debt. And there's a term called financial repression. That's where you have steady inflation, and it erodes the real value of debt, but it's not enough where people lose full confidence in the currency and they don't really notice. So they're trying to thread that needle, have just enough inflation to eat away the real value of their debt without people noticing and revolting in the street. But at some point, we're headed to a point, if this trajectory just continues, at some point, 100% of federal tax receipts are going to go to service just interest on the debt. We're headed to that point. And obviously, it can't go that long. People will lose confidence before that. And the variable in that equation is interest rates. If you double interest rates, we get there twice as fast. So there's no good solution to it. And these are things we all need to ask ourselves and prepare for. And you mentioned people say, "Oh, it's America. Nothing bad can happen here." Well, I'm not necessarily saying this is like the demise of America or anything, but
I am. I'll say it for you. And I've got an American hat
Sure.
on my head. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. And, I don't disagree with you, but you don't have to be in that camp to say, "Oh, well, everything's going to be fine." It's not like you could say, "Hey, we're somewhere in the middle. We're going to go through some hard times." That's going to happen. And now's the time to take some practical preparedness steps to do that. The day of reckoning is going to come, and, we all need to prepare for that.
So you said they're threading the needle on, you called it financial repression, which is a term
Mhm.
I've never heard before, but you're basically saying a gradual process of inflation. It's like slowly rolling your friend down the hill while he's asleep so he doesn't wake up and notice while you're playing a prank on him. But there's a risk that, he starts rolling pretty quickly and he wakes up.
Mhm.
And that's what I guess you could call money velocity.
Mhm.
What would need to occur for us to, and I do feel like we are getting that money velocity. I haven't really looked at the data, so I can't say assuredly. But what do you think we need in order to have that pickup that is so often described during a stage of a currency crisis, where you eventually get the public waking up to you know, um, the loss of faith in retaining their savings? What needs to happen?
Man, that's a really tough question because there could be, to quote Jim Rickards again, he calls, there's going to be a catalyst, right? He calls this complexity theory, complex dynamic systems, and trying to predict the snowflake, so to speak, that causes the avalanche is always kind of really tough. But if you can notice that the snowpack is highly unstable, it's kind of, you're more productive focusing on the instability of the system rather than trying to identify the snowflake that's going to cause the avalanche. And there's a ton of potential catalysts out there. One that few people talk about is, we're so focused here in the United States on all the domestic issues going on and infighting and everything. Well, there's a whole world out there that does not like us, the United States. And the geopolitical stage is also becoming very unstable. So, war is another potential catalyst. There's tons that could cause this, financial system to come imploding. And, I don't try and predict what the catalyst might be.
Okay, so all of this being so, when this happens, when there is an incredible amount of currency units being printed, people are getting free money, throughout history, you enter manias. And silver's, as you said, is 50% off its highs. It's one of the few things that has not entered a mania. And part of that is due to the suppression of the fake price versus the real demand for it. But actually, that manipulation of price causes more distortions, which makes it even more ripe for a mania. We said in this intro, I said forget gold. There's something happening in silver. So why don't you talk to that?
Yeah, exactly. And we're seeing this right now. There's a shift in the general market from momentum related stocks and sectors towards value stocks and sectors. And we're starting to see some inflows not only to just gold and silver, but more value oriented, kind of stocks and sectors. But you look at this Wall Street bets movement that started back in, what was it, January, and then a small segment of that movement was like, they're looking for what's the next thing that's undervalued that can be a potential mania, and boom, they identified silver. Well, because it's obvious. Well, it just takes another small percentage of the investing populace to come to that same conclusion that they correctly came to. So I think that's going to happen. Silver is ripe for a speculative mania. It's got a lot of the real characteristics that Bitcoin had. A lot of people will say, hey, Bitcoin, there can only ever be 21 million of them. So it's ripe for, the speculative mania. Well, silver, there's only less than 1 billion ounces mined every year. That's a very small market cap. Call it 1 billion ounces times $30 silver. That's $30 billion globally. That's a market right there that's ripe for a mania. I'm not predicting when that's going to happen, but I am confident that we will see that.
Yeah, there was actually, because it was about a 9% year over year decrease in mine supply due to some closures. And so I think it was only 780 million mined ounces. And if I recall from our previous interviews, you've stated about 70% of that goes into industrial use. And so is that what makes it so attractive, that there's X amount mined, but 70% of it is just pulled off the table?
Yeah. And so you're right. Most of silver's mining output goes to industrial uses. And by the way, there's more and more industrial uses. Industrial demand is projected to grow, especially with this, green revolution and electronic vehicles, all of this. So there's going to be more industrial demand for silver. But the variable is investment demand. That's what's going to see the price really move. And back in 2020 was the first time in a long time investment demand actually exceeded industrial demand for the first time in a very long time. I don't have the source data for that, but I read that somewhere, and from Steve Santangelo. So that's key right there. I mean, that right there is an indicator of a shift in psychology of investors. So that's something I'm looking to, a trend I'm expecting to continue.
Now, one of the other things that you were talking about was the potential of a future COMEX default that maybe happens at the latter stages of this fiat currency crisis later this decade, perhaps. Talk about why, talk a little bit about that in the silver market specifically versus the gold market.
Yes, I believe the silver market is the most manipulated market on the planet, and we can see that. Like Ted Butler puts out a lot of data. Nick Laird, I look at his charts a lot, and it shows like the days of the amount of short positions relative to global production. So like silver is so heavily shorted, and if the end industrial users all try and take delivery at the same time, I mean, it's ripe for a squeeze that could potentially cause a default on the COMEX. And again, when I say default, there's fine print in there that says they can settle in cash, but I don't base a COMEX default. That's not like my primary investment thesis. That's not why I invest in silver, but it's just another thing that could very well happen in the years ahead that could send the price rising. I'm not banking on that, but it's very possible. So it's just another upside kicker.
So as we shift a little bit away from the conversation on silver, I want to encourage everyone to sign up to the Silver Chartist right there down below in the description and pinned to the comments right there down below. Steve, now here's where I want to shift, right? When you and I first met, you did not have the Silver Chartist, and you started it after our first interview. And, you and I have gotten to know each other pretty well off air, and we've talked a lot about business. I've said many times that I think the number one way to protect yourself is to have a cash flow business, ideally one that, can't be shut down, by by a government on a brick and mortar store or whatnot. Tell me a little bit about what you've learned in important business philosophies that have helped you so far.
Yeah. So I think, at some point, we all have things we're just really interested in, right? It's been said that if you read 10 books on a given topic, you're probably an expert in that topic. You may actually know more than people who have degrees in that. For me, I've just been fascinated by the silver market and the monetary system, the global financial system, the Federal Reserve for like 15 years now. And I just, been reading so much and studying for so long that eventually it's like it wells up within you and it starts to overflow. And you find yourself talking to people about it and trying to teach them who don't necessarily want to learn about it, I decided to start posting on Twitter. And then I found that, I was resonating. So I decided, I'm going to try and share this with more people with a newsletter. I believe I can help people. So, as far as how that might translate to other people, yeah, we all have something that we're passionate about, something we care deeply about that can help others. And, there's nothing wrong with seeking to monetize that. It can be really fulfilling and you can serve other people. So having a servant's heart really helps.
What would you say are the biggest mistakes that you think people make when they're trying to start a business? I think I've discussed this topic a bit on this channel. We've talked a bit about it. Let's pretend someone listening to this has said, I heard this. I've got my main job, but you're right. I should start another business, and they've been thinking about it, but maybe they hadn't pulled the trigger, or they're getting anxious about it. Right? They're worried. What if it doesn't work out? Or they're overthinking things. What are the biggest mistakes you think that people run into when trying to get their side hustle off the ground, and what are ways to mitigate it?
Okay. So two big ones come to mind right away. And I know because I've made so many mistakes along the way. A lot of us are just, we're trapped in the rat race. We want to get out, we just want to get ahead. And the focus can just be on how do I make money for myself? And that's totally natural. I've been through that myself. But when you kind of shift that focus to how can I serve other people, it just kind of comes back to you. It's kind of a natural cycle. So really make your focus on how can I serve and help others first. And then the other thing I would say is, don't procrastinate. The hardest thing can be getting started. If you're like me, you want everything to be perfect and in order before you try something and launch something. I'm learning kind of as we go that, it doesn't have to be perfect. The most important thing is you take the next step, whatever the next step for you is. If you're drawn to this, take that step. And, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's okay. I'll just say real quick that this Silver Charge letter launched on your podcast. You had me on as a guest and you said, hey, where can people find more about you? We know you're on Twitter. So I was prepared to say Twitter. You said, where's your website? And I said, well, it's not ready yet, silverchartist.com. And I shouldn't have mentioned that, but everyone started going there and it wasn't even set up yet, but people were signing up. So, that was a lesson in it doesn't have to be perfect, and it still worked. We've since gone back and fixed some things, but.
Okay, you just lost 5 points because your phone beeped. So right now you're down 5 points. Okay, so all right, that one's interesting. Now, here's what I want to ask you. Right, you're a relatively successful guy, relatively stable career. Making an okay living, not anywhere what you do now by owning your own businesses and your own investments, but you had a stable job. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe deep down, they feel like they're capable of more. Maybe I could earn more money. Maybe I do have this bigger calling. But it's scary because you already have a full-time job, right? You already have a stable income that pays you well, or whatever it is. You're used to your lifestyle. Talk to me about the fears of being a 40-something-year-old guy with a wife and kids with a stable job that you've had for a long time, and then deciding you were going to start a side hustle, the mindset behind that. But also, I would imagine maybe there's a fear of failure involved in it because you already have a stable career and a stable job. I can't relate to that because I was just a bum 19-year-old, dropped out and started, writing and selling my books and whatnot. But I can imagine there's a lot of people, maybe middle age, that have some relatively stable job. Maybe they don't even love it, but it's stable, or maybe they do love it, but they want to start a new business. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I guess there's kind of two approaches. One is like they call it burn the bridges or burn the boats. Just jump in and go for it, because that's going to light a fire under you and make you have to go for it. I didn't necessarily take that approach. I kept my full-time job. I active duty military officer pilot for 17 years, and I did both the newsletter until the newsletter got going, and then I kind of went part time in the military just as a reservist, a couple days a month. So I took that hybrid approach, waiting. I don't think there's one right answer for every person. I would start by asking yourself, do you want it to be a side hustle, or do you want it to be a full-time job? And one thing I would say is I think most people, everyone really, is you're capable of more than you think. So don't set your standards and your dreams too low, because you're capable of more than you think. I think Tim Ferriss, I'm going to butcher the quote, but he said the competition for mediocrity is the most fierce, because that's what everyone strives for, is mediocrity. So there's all this competition for that. But if you want to strive for something great, there's not much competition for it, because so few people strive for that. So you're just by striving for that, you're setting yourself apart.
What do you think the biggest things you've learned about money or business? I would imagine your learning expedited when you went off on your own.
Yeah, it's nice to have another level of financial freedom. Take some pressure off, but as far as living paycheck to paycheck and that kind of thing. But it's money doesn't satisfy. I'm learning that there's got to be something higher to life than just making a bunch of money. And really ultimate satisfaction, fulfillment comes in serving other people. And I'm a Christian, so I believe I'm put here to bring glory to God, and that's what I try and do, and that's where fulfillment comes from. Not necessarily making a bunch of money, although it's nice. Making money is nice. I'm not one of these people who's like money is evil or anything. It's not a solution to all your problems.
Okay, you're one of those guys. No, I'm just joking. So let's talk about that. You were talking about purpose, and when I take a 40,000 foot bird's eye view, I can't help but to look at this reality as this. I don't even look at myself as a person. I look at myself as a spiritual being that's using this body kind of like a rental car, and I'm here for certain, spiritual lessons or whatnot that I'm meant to learn. And it's the only way I can personally make sense of the craziness of the world that we're in. And I kind of feel like we all have a kind of a divine purpose. And I think it makes coping with the craziness of the world also easier, because you can figure out where to direct your energy, what's important, what's my purpose, what are my values. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there. And let's see. So,
how do you find your purpose? How did you find yours?
Well, I guess I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, I've got a big set of purpose, but like exactly how I fulfill that, I'm still trying to figure it out, to be honest with you. I mean, I know my highest calling is to, for me personally, my belief system is to bring glory to God, honor my, take care of my family, and then serve others. That's kind of the hierarchy. The ways I do that, I'm still trying to figure it out, to be honest.
So if you get away from like just saying bring glory to God, right? Like, because we all know that it's almost like it almost sounds more like theory at that level. But when you bring it down to Steve Penny himself, what are the ways that's important to you in your life, or your goals with that in your life? Obviously I would imagine Silver Chartist is one of those mediums. Your business is an extension of that. It's a vehicle for you to serve other people. But tell me a little bit about what your goals are.
Yeah, my goals with Silver Chartist are, I'll just tell you, our mission statement at Silver Chartist is to help everyday people achieve the time freedom to pursue life's higher callings, things of eternal significance. So it transcends money. That's the goal of our business.
That's good. You said that too fast. Say that again. That was really good.
Yeah,
What's your mission statement at Silver Chartist?
Yeah, I put some thought of that. Helping everyday people achieve the time freedom to pursue life's higher callings, things of eternal significance. That's our purpose. That's why Silver Chartist exists. It's not to make a bunch of money. Hopefully that happens. But what are we going to do with that money? What's the why behind it?
Did you pirate that off somebody's? That was so good.
No, I just came up with it. Yeah.
So Why do you think that's important? I feel like it's an interesting exercise to think about for all of our lives, even if you don't own a business. Is what's your mission statement?
Mhm.
How do you think clarifying that has helped you, and how'd you come about that answer?
Um, how I came up with that, I don't actually recall. I go for these hikes every day just to clear my mind. I go take the dog and get out there 5, 6 miles. That's my time to just think and reflect and pray. To be honest with you, and I just came up with that the time because I thought that's what the goal is. It wasn't any kind of like I've read some book on how to come up with a mission statement. Here's how you. I just thought about it. That what's the purpose of Silver Chartist? I want it to be about more than making money, and that's what we came up with.
Um, I feel like the world would be a lot different if people were taught how to seek a purpose in life.
Mhm.
Maybe not exactly how to find it, but just encouraged to seek it in
Mhm.
general. Because I feel like our life would be full of a lot more meaning, and thus, we wouldn't have as much emotional distress and anger and dependency on this materialistic society and all these types of things. And we'd probably have a lot people would be a lot nicer, people would be a lot
Mhm.
kinder, and they'd probably be a lot happier.
Mhm.
And I wonder, how do you think you come about building more meaning into your life? Like, let's say someone watching this video and they got shaken up a little bit by lockdowns, and they've had a big shift in their life, and they're trying to rethink how to find meaning in life. How do you do it?
Wow. I don't know. I mean, I wish I had the answer to that, a specific answer. I guess for me, it was, not to turn this into like, talking about my faith and everything, but, I was back in Air Force pilot training and, it's a very tough program. A lot of people wash out. And I'm like, I need God's help to get through this. So I'm going to start reading the Bible and doing spiritual things, get to know God and he'll help me out through this. And, it's kind of a weird story, but that's my story. And that's, how I came to faith, and that gave me a higher purpose. So that might be a weird answer, but that's my personal story.
Steve, don't call it a weird answer. You said before you wanted to talk more about this stuff, so we're having a conversation about this
That's
stuff.
true.
So, and I think it's important, right? You can rehash the same stuff about gold or silver, but
Yeah.
when we're able to screw our minds right on, that's when everything comes together. So tell me what the most important part that you learned about perseverance during that time. You said this was a program many people dropped out of. You were studying a lot to try to find your resolve for it. What'd you learn?
Yeah, here's one takeaway. I think it applies is, whenever people start out on a new pursuit that's hard, I think you've got kind of two categories of people. You've got people who are immersers; they immerse themselves in it, and dabblers. You've got dabblers and people who immerse themselves in anything. So, to really get ahead in whatever your pursuit is, I think you got to really pick your path and immerse yourself in it. Go for it full steam. If you're just kind of dabbling with whatever your goals are, you're probably not going. Your chances of achieving them are much less likely.
Dabblers versus immersers.
Mhm.
I like that. And for me, I found that one of the most important things is being kind of a little bit ruthlessly honest with myself for where I fall on that scale. Um, how do you move from being a dabbler to an immerser, in your opinion?
Well, whenever you immerse yourself in something, it's going to be hard, So you got to persevere and not quit. That's for sure. I mean, even with the silver chartist business, I tried many things in the past. I've been trying to break free financially with creating multiple streams of income for, gosh, I don't know, 8 or 9 years now, and almost all of them failed. I mean, they would be embarrassing if I told you about some of the things I tried. But I one thing to my credit, I guess you could say, is I persisted. I didn't give up. If other people can do it, so can I, and so can you. That's one thing I took away. Do you have anything to add to that? Because we've been on a similar journey, except for you were smart enough to kind of step out of your comfort zone when you were much younger. I wish I had the guts to do that.
Well, I realized the whole world was a lie.
Mm.
Many people either disagree with that or it makes them uncomfortable to sit with it. It actually gave me freedom. because then I was like, who cares if I start my, because I wrote my first book, no one would publish it. So I sold it out of the trunk of my car. And that led to a book deal with Penguin Random House. And this whole career was birthed out of it. But once I realized the whole world was a lie, I actually wasn't afraid to fail anymore.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, so few people like you like one thing I really respect about you, you don't care what people think. You say what you think. You don't care what people think, and you're not afraid to go down the road less traveled. If you have your eyes set on something, you go do it. And to be honest, I wish I was more like that at a younger age.
I think that when I make this channel, today we've talked a lot more about philosophy and a lot more about mindset. I personally think it's the most important stuff because we've got to have this shift in consciousness. We've got to become more self-reliant. And my hope is, I don't preach on this channel. I ask questions and I hopefully ask the right questions. So it's great conversations with people such as yourself. But my hope is that it, more than learning about silver or the right stock, I hope that it encourages people to take control of their lives. And that's one of the things that I've really watched you do since I've known you. You were like, look, now I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to start this business. Now I'm going to get multiple sources of income. And it's why I like to ask you a lot about your story, because it's a really good story, but it's also a story of how quickly you can take the reins of your life and drastically increase the purpose, your happiness, and your finances in a short period of time. So my question is, has it surprised you how quickly you've bursted to the next level once you finally dug your feet in the ground and said, this is what I'm going to do?
Yes, it has 100%. This has exceeded my wildest expectations. And, we're all subject to normalcy bias. We expect the future to be like the past. So like I said, I've tried many things. So, my goalpost was admittedly a little bit too low. Our community has just grown in the past 8 months. We have, over 35,000 free and paid members in our community. And I mean, I'm just humbled. I'm honored. So it's happened much faster than I ever would have expected. And I'm just grateful and honored to see that happen.
So you said you think maybe your goals were too small. Your expectations were too small.
Yeah. Yep.
Have you heard that Michelangelo quote? He says, the biggest tragedy in life isn't that you aim too high and miss, but you aim too low and reach it.
Yeah, no, I have heard that before. I didn't know it was attributed to him, but yeah, that's so true.
Okay. So if you were on your deathbed, and you wanted to impart wisdom to your children and you were in the right mind, what are the most important principles you would want to leave with them?
Well, these are conversations we actually have. So, as I mentioned, I'm a Christian, I'm a religious person. So I want to instill that in my children first and foremost, above everything else, and I try and teach them, don't be afraid to go against the status quo. God has called you to something. We all have a unique calling on our life. I believe that firmly, every single person. And, it's up to you to step out in faith to claim that. It doesn't just happen just because you have a calling. You have to go step out in faith and step out of your comfort zone. So I want my kids to think outside of the box, not be afraid to fail, not be afraid to go down the path less traveled. So those are some things I would think about.
So you said you have to claim it. And I feel like everybody has $1 million ideas in their head. And so I feel like the problem is that most people don't claim it for whatever reason. What were some of the biggest limiting beliefs that you had getting this process going for you and taking your life and your freedom, your finances, your purpose to the next level?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And let me just go make one clarification. There's a lot of people who say name it, claim it. I'm not one of those people. I'm saying you got to step out in faith and try for something. I'm not saying just name it and claim it. But yeah, as far as the question was, what were my limiting beliefs?
Yeah. And when you said name it, claim it, I just mean, you said you basically said one of the most important things is for your kids to be able to go out there and claim their life and not be afraid, and the fears and the inadequacies or the thoughts in their head. What were some of the biggest limiting beliefs that you had, and how were you able to overcome them?
Yeah. So like I don't have a background in finance. I never worked on Wall Street. And you hear other people that you have on your shows and people who are in the public domain. They a lot of them have that background. So it's like, well, I can't do what they're doing. But really, what I found that was an initial limiting belief. But you don't need a degree to be an expert in something. Certifications really don't mean much in my book. I think self-learning is the highest level of learning. If you're motivated, you can go learn on your own for most things. I'm not talking about like if you want to be a brain surgeon, obviously, but so that was one. Is like I don't have the credentials. Well, credentials aren't often needed.
Okay, so let's wrap it up like this. We're looking at a new world. We're looking at a new age. We're looking at a new future. What are the most important couple philosophies or mindsets to bring into this new future?
I think number one would be an increase in self-reliance, being resilient. I think not to be Debbie Downer, but I think we're headed for some very difficult times, not just monetarily, but from a number of angles. The Fourth Turning book describes it perfectly. We're headed into the civil unrest cycle, the war cycle, the economic crash, if you want to use that word, cycle. So being resilient is going to be really important in a lot of areas of life. And then, another thing is, increasing your mental fortitude, like, not quitting, persevering. It's going to be easy to give up in this environment because it's going to seem like opportunities are more scarce. Well, they may be more scarce, but that doesn't mean that, you can't prosper in this environment.
Powerful. Self-reliance, mental fortitude. For everyone listening, if you enjoyed today's episode, I know we talked a little bit more about philosophy, mindset. If you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a like on this video to send this out into YouTube universe so more people see it. Give us a comment down below that says Steve Rules right there down below, or let us know one of your favorite parts of today's episode right there down below. And if you haven't yet, make sure you sign up to Silver Chartist, which is right there down below, pinned to the comments in the description right there down below, where you can sign up for free. So make sure you hit that subscribe, that bell notification to send this out into the YouTube universe. And Steve, any last words?
No, brother. Thanks. I really appreciate you having me on. Hopefully, I think people are going to like this conversation. I hope so. I know it's a little bit abnormal for what we talk about, but I think it was really good. I like talking about this stuff, and I'm happy to come on and chat more about these kind of things anytime you'd have me. I appreciate you inviting me.
So for everyone listening, make sure you give us that comment down below, Steve Rules, and sign up right there down below for the free Silver Chartist report.